Welcome into the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 all around the world. As I'm still battling a cold on the iHeartRadio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us this afternoon as we get you set up for your work week. I got things we're going to get into today, including SEC's projected order of finish according to the FPI, which is interesting. What do you think are the top 100 games of the upcoming football season? We'll get into that. We may talk a little baseball. Justin Thomas just basically slapped around Jimbo Fisher after he won the big tournament yesterday, the PGA Championship. And yeah, we'll tell you what he said. And we'll look at some ACC coaches rankings and who's going to get fired, who I think is going to get fired. Yeah, all of that. But I want to start with a report from ESPN about the SEC basically starting their own championship, meaning that they're going to have their meetings here next week on I think they're in Destin. I can't remember. I think they're in Destin. But anyway, here's the big thing with that. So the SEC may get to a point where, and it may be with some other leagues too, where they have their own championship and they end up with basically 8 teams that would compete in the SEC for the championship. So this is an idea that's on the table, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Commissioner Sankey is mad about the way the CFP expansion talks collapsed earlier this year, and he's been vocal about his displeasure, and that's going to guide his league and the decisions that they make. So a veteran collegiate official said, whatever collegiately existed among those 5 commissioners appears to be gone. Sankey's in such a catbird seat right now. One idea to be discussed by the officials in Destin is the notion of the SEC creating and running and profiting from its own intra-SEC postseason. The most obvious model is an 8-team model, but there are others that will be discussed. Now, a lot of this is going to come down to TV money. So I know there are going to be people that are thinking that I'm throwing this from the perspective of, the SEC wants to have just their champion, and that's the national champion. I don't think it's an issue of that. I think it's an issue of money. And the reason that I say that is because, we goof about the people with the lower back tattoos with the SEC logo on them. But in reality, do you think that those people are scared of teams from other conferences? No, they're not. You think that Georgia sits at home and thinks, yeah, we're scared of Ohio State? Do you really think that? No, I don't think it's that way at all. But I do think that if the SEC can make more money by having their own SEC-only postseason, then and they could venture out on their own and do their own thing, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, and it comes back down to this too, though. The SEC is going to recognize that as the best team in the country? And there's going to be people that are going to say, okay, but you didn't play such and such. But in the end, I think I kind of agree with what Commissioner Sankey is talking about. Now, this is all in the clouds right now, basically. So, but if you had an 8-team tournament last season, here would be your matchups. You'd have Georgia versus Mississippi State, Ole Miss and Tennessee. Man, get the mustard bottles. Alabama and Mizzou, and Kentucky and Arkansas. So that's interesting in its own right. But, you know, the idea of this happening, I mean, it's really not that far fetched. The model that we have right now, I don't think is going to be around forever. I really, really don't. But I do think that if the SEC thinks that they can make more money and keep themselves in a national spotlight where people look to them as, yeah, that team that won the all SEC basically tournament at the end of the year, they're the best team in football. And TV providers are willing to pay for it and basically determine that, hey, we think that's the national champion because we told you so. Why wouldn't the SEC want to do it? I don't know if I'd want to see Alabama in their first round matchup, though, playing Mizzou. I'd much rather have 4 teams than 8 when it comes to that. Simply because, I mean, let's be honest, it's what we've talked about before. You know, the SEC has some great teams that are on top there, but after, you know, your top, let's say the top 2 teams in each division, there's definitely a degree of separation from them and the rest. Okay. And if we're going to have these games, you can't have games. I think Alabama last season would have beat Mizzou probably. This is a Mizzou team that lost to Army in a bowl game. I think Alabama last year would have probably won 47-0. It would have been more along the lines of, can Mizzou score against them? Okay. I mean, do you really want to see that? I mean, let's think about that for a second. There are interesting matchups too. We already had Ole Miss and Tennessee last year. Remember the mustard bottles, you know? But in the end, I think it's going to come down to Sankey's going to put something together that is going to be best for his conference. And to be completely honest, if you're in a league, that's what you should do. You got to do what's best for your league and then go from there. There also is going to be talk in the meetings in Destin about the 2 favorite scheduling models, the 1 and 7. If the SEC sticks with 8 league games, basically you'd have 1 rivalry game, and then you would rotate the rest of the 7. There's also the 3 and 6 model. So having 3 teams they play every season. For example, Georgia would play Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina, and then rotate the rest of them. So, yeah, we could talk about that a little bit today, but do you think that the SEC, and let's not go at this from the perspective of, well, I think the SEC has the best players anyway, or the best teams anyway. You have to look at it from the perspective of what the SEC is going to do to make money. Okay? So there are people that say, especially with the ACC and the Pac-12, they're so far behind financially, and it's going to put pressure on the brand name programs there like Clemson and Southern Cal. Clemson theoretically could be before 2036 before they could theoretically get out, according to several reports, because the ACC has a grant of rights that would basically hang universities up in court. But, you know, there was talk of the alliance where, you know, the Big Ten joined that alliance to help basically calm things down when Texas and Oklahoma decided, hey, we're going to go to the SEC. But will pressure be put on the Big Ten to add members and attempt to keep up with the SEC? Now, if that happens, could you theoretically see maybe Clemson going to the Big Ten? Maybe getting to a point where we have 4 super conferences, or hell, 3 super conferences, and then go from there. There's so many things that are out there. So many things that are out there. Remember last year, during the ACC kickoff, SEC media days, I remember it coming down, and we were sitting in Charlotte, Lawton Swan and I were, and someone's like, "Hey, Texas and Oklahoma are going to join the SEC." And I looked at Lawton and laughed, and I'm like, "Man, that's like an Onion headline. There's no way that's going to happen. Why would Texas do that? They've got their own network." The reason that I'm telling you this is because the idea of this happening is not as far-fetched as you might think. We may get to a point where we have the SEC saying, "You know what? We're just going to do our own thing. Thanks for playing." And it may come off as an elitist type thing, and in some ways it does. You may not have I think we'll have questions every year. You know, let's use last year as an example. Georgia rolls through, and let's say they had that tournament, and they win that tournament last year. Could they match up with Ohio State? Could they match up with X, Y, or Z? It's interesting. Lots of things that are going to be coming down the pipe. Dakota says, as long as Tennessee plays Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, I don't care what they do. Yeah, and I think keeping some of those traditional rivalries are great, but it's also going to get to a point where some of those rivalries may go away. It's just something to think about. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Should the SEC have their own tournament, basically, with, I guess, the top 8 teams, top 4 in each division, going and playing each year? So, yeah, that's an interesting thing there. We'll see how that comes out. Papa B Online says, if North Carolina accepts SEC bid and Clemson declines Disney's offer to move them to the SEC, the league will offer Virginia. It's all up to Disney. I mean, wow, there's lots of things going on that I don't know about. Some interesting stuff there. All right, 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That's the number to dial if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown. I think that, and look, we've already seen this with the way that the Big Ten handled the COVID crisis. I say the COVID crisis. Please don't call me and talk to me about COVID's not real, et cetera, et cetera. The pandemic that we dealt with. Basically, the SEC led the way, and then a lot of other people just followed. The SEC is going to be on they're going to be at the cutting edge, in my opinion, on this front. And will they expand again? Who knows? But the idea of, all right, let's say they wanted to expand and they wanted to bring Clemson into the conference. Are we going to get to a point now where it's all about football? Because that's kind of what the ACC commissioner said last year. Is all the expansion just going to be on football? That's something else to think about. Are we not going to think about, teams in basketball, baseball, etc.? Which, by the way, getting Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC, I think makes them a better basketball conference and a better baseball conference too. Not that they're not already great on the baseball front anyway, but Texas and Oklahoma together, they generally put together some pretty good baseball teams. But anyway, we'll have to see how that shakes out. We'll take your calls on this afternoon, 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Papa B says Clemson's men's basketball would benefit with a move to the SEC. Okay. I mean, I guess I could see that. It's not like the ACC, though, has been like knockdown drag out for the past couple of seasons. Yeah, 2 teams in the Final Four. I get that. But in the end, it's sort of like the SEC in football. You've got a couple of teams up top that are really good, and then the rest are just kind of right after that. All right, 803-978-1832. Some other comments here. Elijah says I slander Josh Heupel. I do not slander Josh Heupel. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't think I'm into all that. Jay says Rob hates gimmicks. That is the quote of the day. Very good, Jay. Very good. And Brandon says Jadeveon Clowney re-signed with the Cleveland Browns yesterday. Yep. You're right about that. Clowney's only 29, man. He should be getting into a point where he's in the peak of his career. The guy's already been on what? 1, 2, 3 teams, 4 teams. I can't remember. He was a can't miss prospect, though. I'd like to know. He was one of the first to get that microfracture surgery, and that kind of slowed him down from there. Anyway, he was a heck of a talent, still is. All right, quick break. We'll have more when we come back. Captain Tripp says he's already peaked, Rob. Yeah, the NFL's like that. 29, you're an old man. Quick break. We'll come back. We'll have more for you. This is The Rundown. You're listening to Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, greetings to you folks over there. Hello to Uncle Lou, Jay, Dakota, Brandon, Captain Trips, Elijah. How are you, sir? Papa B. You know, I think that this story is a big deal because they're going to have these meetings in Destin before, and then basically everybody's going to go to vacation after that. And they're going to decide, hey, this is what we're going to do. Would not shock me if in the cloakroom they decided, hey, we're going to have our own tournament within the SEC, and we're just going to go about it and do it just because financially it makes the most sense. Because a TV executive is going to look at that and say, you know what? You're telling me I can have a tournament with theoretically Alabama, let's just say in the big picture front, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and we could even throw Florida into the mix. We can have a tournament with those 4, and whoever else is there and have the ability to have that. You can sell that. Advertisers will buy that. That's a heck of a lot more enticing to look at than, hey, let's watch, Georgia play Michigan and Michigan gets blown the hell out. I mean, that's better television, in my opinion. Would you not agree? Just a thought. Getting better. Yeah, I think that, look, the whole thing with, and this is what I talked about with some folks up there that are beat writers for ACC schools. There's a collection of blue bloods at North Carolina and Duke and Wake Forest that are of the opinion that West Virginia doesn't have the academic standards to be in the ACC. That's what I've heard from several different beat writers that are up there. Now, are they going to have to just take a bite and go? I don't know, but the wine and cheese blue blood fools up there, they don't want them in the conference. So, I mean, the fact that West Virginia is in the Big 12 is stupid anyway. It's one of the dumbest things ever. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. Papa B says the ACC should bring in West Virginia, but he says, I say no to Notre Dame. Look, Notre Dame is going to have to figure out something. The idea that they're going to be independent forever is backwards. It's looking dumber and dumber by the day. And I'll tell you why. They've got that contract with NBC. I'm not sure when that ends. I should have looked that up before we came onto the show here. But NBC could theoretically go out and get, let's say that we have the SEC says, you know what, we're going to do our thing. And then you've got 3 other conferences that say, you know what, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with our teams that are in our conference. And NBC's like, well, we have Notre Dame. Well, maybe we could do something else. Or maybe we could get to a point where 8 years from now that NBC says, hey, we can go and bid on the SEC. Why not? We can go and bid on the Big Ten. Why not? You get more. You theoretically could get more for your money than just showing Notre Dame playing Navy and Southern Cal and whatever else they could come up with on that schedule. You would get more bang for your buck. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Mayhem Matthew online says, checking in and the SEC won't have their own playoffs. It's a bluff to get what they want. Well, what do they want? I mean, what do they want? I think it would make sense. But you may end up with the SEC expanding and adding more teams. How big do you go? Do you go to 20 teams? Do you go to 24 teams? If you go to 20, let's say you go to 20 teams and your top 4 in each division have the capability of making that playoff, that would be interesting. That would be interesting. All right, your thoughts on this at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. I've got, oh yeah, here you go. I thought this was interesting. The top 100 games of the upcoming season. Now, some folks are going to have certain games that they're going to look at and be like, hey, I want, this game means a lot to me, and I think this is one of the biggest games of the season. You could argue, Alabama-Auburn's one of the biggest games of the year. That's the biggest game to that fan base. But as far as the biggest games for the upcoming season, for all of college football, I thought this was kind of cool. This is from 247 Sports. Number 1 on their list is Texas A&M at Alabama. I think that's just, first of all, I think Alabama is going to beat them senseless. I think Nick Saban's going to run it up because I don't think Texas A&M is going to be that great. I really don't. And I think, the game is October the 8th. Yeah, they may try to hang some points on them there. Or you could go the other way. And let's say that A&M pulls off the upset. They go into Alabama and they win that game. Whoa, wow. That would throw some shots too. Number 2 is Alabama at Texas on September the 10th. I don't think that game's going to be worth anything either. Alabama wins by 17. Southern Cal at Utah. That's game number 3. As far as we're going to look at the top 10 here. Okay. I mean, I guess you have to put something in there from the from the Pac-12. Why not? That's probably going to determine who wins the conference. So yeah, that's pretty big. Michigan and Ohio State. I don't see the big deal with that game. I know the Big Ten folks, they love it. Yay, Michigan, Ohio State. Up until last season, Ohio State won 14 games in a row? It's not really something that I want to write home about. I mean, I understand it's a big rivalry up there. Land of corn, children of the corn, buy yourself some corn, what the hell ever. I don't really care about that game. I don't. So until Michigan starts winning some more of them, okay. Texas and Oklahoma. That game has always been big for me just because even when the teams aren't theoretically close to each other, you end up with a pretty good game. You really do. So I'm all right with Texas and Oklahoma being in the top 10. Notre Dame and Ohio State. Yes, this is a game that's worthwhile. Notre Dame going on the road to play at Ohio State to start the season September the 3rd. one of the top games of the season. Even though Notre Dame is like a 14, 17-point dog, whatever it is, I'm buying that. Why not? Notre Dame and Ohio State. Oregon and Georgia. Now, this is an interesting game, not because I think it's going to be competitive, because I don't trust Bo Nix. And to be honest, I don't know what kind of head coach Dan Lanning's going to be. Nobody really knows because he hasn't done it yet. Not on a big front. Yes, he's a great defensive mind, but we don't know how good he's going to be. I don't know how. I mean, Bo Nix has shown me what he can show me. Nothing to really write home about. But the interesting part about this is that you have basically East meets West, so I can understand that game being in the top 10. Number 8 on the list, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. Okay. Mullet versus Venables. Fine. I can buy that. NC State at Clemson on October the 1st. I think the reason this game is in the mix is because people think whoever wins that game is going to win the ACC championship. And there is a lot of folks that are looking at NC State and they're kind of grumbling behind the scenes a little bit. And they're saying, you know what? Maybe that's the team that can make some noise this season. Maybe a little bit here and there. I don't know. We shall see. They do return 17 starters, the most of any ACC team. And Dave Doeren believes he has the best quarterback in the country with Devin Leary. Just ask him. He'll tell you. And number 10, Utah at Oregon. That game is on November the 19th. Okay. I guess that's another Pac-12 battle. Do you agree with those games being in the top 10 best games of the season? As we look through the rest of the top 100, Clemson at Notre Dame is number 11. Alabama at Ole Miss is 12. Auburn, Alabama is 14. Notre Dame, Southern Cal is 15. Clemson, Wake Forest at 19. I'm not buying that either. I mean, outside of the South, does anyone really care about that game? We'll see on that front. A couple of other games, Florida and Florida State checks in at 22. Miami at Clemson. Now that should be a game that should be higher than 24, simply because first season of Mario Cristobal, Miami going into Clemson, trying to break that Clemson winning streak at home. That should be a little bit higher in my opinion. All right, what game are you looking forward to the most? Do you agree with the top 10? 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Papa B says, y'all like to watch the Egg Bowl. Yeah, I agree with you on that. The Egg Bowl is always fun. I can get into that. All right, more of the rundown when we come back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. I'm not buying every single SEC West game should be on the top 20. Stop it. I could get into that LSU and Bama. Yeah. Where is that game on the list? Hold on. LSU at Florida is 33. Mississippi State and Ole Miss is at 34. Georgia at South Carolina is at 39. Clemson at Florida State is 83. South Carolina at Arkansas is 97. Okay. No, this is a palmetto tree and crescent moon, Jay. It's the symbol for our state. Yeah, we talked about that. We got to get some more LSU folks in here. Oof.
code SPORTS to get a free shot at millions of dollars up for grabs this week with your first deposit. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com.
SEC Homer shades. That's funny, Uncle Lou. Thank you for that. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Around the world on the iHeartRadio app. We looked at some of the, according to 247 Sports, the 100 best college football games of 2022. Alabama's in number 1 and number 2 with Texas A&M and Texas. Alabama playing in Texas. That's the playing teams from Texas. Those are, quote unquote, the 2 best games. Me personally, and I guess it's just being here and following those games, following the games that are in the South, the games that I look forward to the most every year, obviously living here in South Carolina, the South Carolina Clemson game is a big deal around here. Georgia and Auburn, you know, it's what they call the South's longest rivalry. Yeah. I mean, that game's always interesting to me, even though Georgia's kind of gotten the better of it here lately. The Iron Bowl was probably up there in the top 10 for me. I get into the Texas and Oklahoma game. Like, that's one of those games, all right, we got to stop and we have to watch that. I used to be big with West Virginia and Pitt. And now I think they're playing each other this year. But as far as other games this year, Tennessee and Pittsburgh, I think, is a great game that's going to have a lot of national attention. Uncle Lou online thinks that Ohio State, Notre Dame. Yeah, I think that's a top 5 game this season as well. Could definitely get behind that. And there are a couple of other games. I like the Tennessee-Florida game because growing up, that was a big deal for me. That game was always one of the better in the conference. And this year it's interesting because Tennessee, on paper, theoretically has the quote-unquote better team than Florida. If Billy Napier wants to gain some friends and get the alumni behind him and, you know, the people down there doing the Gator Chomp, if he can figure out how to beat Tennessee this season, man, that would go a long way. That would go a long, long way. Brandon asked, what's the highest game for South Carolina? The highest game on the list for South Carolina. Hold on. Let me look for it. I think it is the matchup. Hold on. I've got it right here. I circled it earlier. Tennessee at South Carolina is number 60. There was one other South Carolina game that was in the mix. I can't remember. I'm looking for it right now. I don't see it. Oh, Georgia at South Carolina is at number 39. And that's a rivalry game too. Even though Georgia's kind of had the better of it for a bit, still one of the better games played in the South. All right, 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. JetMex says Ohio State versus Notre Dame will be over by the second quarter. Oof. Might be right. But you want to know something, though? Would anybody be shocked if Ohio State beats the snot out of Notre Dame and then Notre Dame wins out? Jason asked if South Carolina and Clemson is in the top 100. No, sir. It's not. Not in the top 100. All right, so I wanted to bring this to you really quick before we go to our next break. ESPN's FPI projected where each team's going to finish in the SEC. We'll start with Vanderbilt. They're projected to go 7th in the East. Mizzou is projected to go 6th. South Carolina is at number 5. Tennessee is 4th in the East. Florida is picked 3rd in the East, according to the FPI. 2nd in the East is Kentucky, and 1st is Georgia. All right, so here's the other interesting thing. You know, we've heard a lot about Sam Pittman and how great Arkansas is. Arkansas is projected to finish 7th in the West, according to ESPN's FPI. So 7th in the West for them, 6th in the West for Mississippi State, 5th in the West for Ole Miss, 4th in the West for Texas A&M, which would make me happy because Jimbo Fisher is a goofball. LSU at 3 in the West. So they're thinking Brian Kelly's going to have, according to their computer projections, a pretty good season. 2nd in the West is Auburn. I'm not buying that. I don't know what Brian Harson's doing, but Auburn every season, they would never surprise me. They could go 10-2 or they could go 6-6. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I really wouldn't. They're going to hand the ball off to Tank Bigsby a lot and hope he carries them. And then, of course, Alabama projected to win the West. All right, so with that, we'll take calls on that too at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Captain Trips with a great line there. Tennessee Vans versus sobriety would be a good matchup. Very good. Kentucky versus DUIs is also a good rivalry. That's very good. Uncle Lou says Tennessee fans versus reality is the most lopsided rivalry of the last 20 years. Wow. That's pretty good too, sir. Pretty good too. 803-978-1832. We're taking calls too on should the SEC start their own playoff where they would basically have the 8 best teams, I guess the top 4 in each division, which if we did it last season, your playoff matchups under the 8-team model, that's just SEC teams, your number 1 seed in the East, Georgia, would play the 4th seed in the West, which would be Mississippi State. Your number 2 seed in the West, Ole Miss, would play Tennessee. Your number 1 seed in the West, Alabama, would play the 4th seed in the East, Mizzou. And Kentucky, the 2 seed in the East, would play Arkansas. Kind of fun to look back on that a little bit, but still interesting if the SEC had their own playoff. Out to the phones we go. Welcome into the rundown. Good afternoon.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Nobody wants the SEC to have their own playoff. What a terrible idea. And me and you are the 2 biggest SEC homers I know. We don't want that, do we? I don't.
I think it comes down to money, though, is what it's basically going to be. If they can get more money by having their own tournament, I think that's the way that Sankey would want to go.
I'm all for making money, but I do think the overall health of college football is more important than only making $900 million instead of making $1 billion.
And I agree with you on that. But if it comes down to it, and Sankey can get some TV executive to say, "Hey, you know what? I'd much rather have 1, 2, 3, and 4 from the West, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the East. We match those up. That's better television than watching Georgia just throat punch Michigan in a college football playoff game, and Cincinnati basically having a game where they're we should just call them bye week when they play Alabama." I mean, I'd much rather see the West versus East matchups than the typical CFP matchups we've had here lately.
Yeah, well, my argument against that would be it's not just SEC matchups in the playoffs that have been lopsided. It's every playoff game, with the exception of like 2, have almost all been blowouts. But I don't want to play an entire season just to turn around and play an SEC tournament at the end. I mean, I'm being serious. I've heard Greg Sankey threaten this before. What's the theory behind this? That okay, I know the other conferences are mad. They they want, or the other TV networks are mad. They want the playoff TV deal to be an open bid. ESPN doesn't. So what's the deal? The SEC then is going to say, okay, well, if ESPN loses the playoffs, we'll just have our own playoff and give it to ESPN. Is that what's behind this?
I think that's the way that it looks, and they want the SEC basically wants to control all of it. Is kind of the vibe that I'm getting. I
disagree with that. Yeah, I hate that. I don't, and I like Sankey. I think he's made a lot of great decisions, and obviously the SEC is the cream of the crop when it comes to football. I mean, they make a ton of money. They win every national championship. But this is the problem we talked about the other day in needing a commissioner. Somebody needs to be looking out for the overall good of college football instead of looking out for the good of themselves. And right now, that's not happening.
Well, I agree with you on that. And that's actually one of my topics for later in the week is who we could have as a commissioner. I mentioned to you last week, I thought it should be Steve Spurrier. He may be too old, but someone else needs to be that commissioner and rule with an iron thumb. This is how we're going to do things, follow the rules. And if you don't, we're going to have to move on.
Steve Spurrier has dementia and early onset Alzheimer's. He's not qualified to be college commissioner. The only thing he's qualified to be is president of the United States. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Uncle Lou joining the program. We appreciate that as always. Tomorrow, that's what we're going to talk about is who should be the commissioner of college football. Because right now it's basically like the Oregon Trail when we were kids. Everybody remembers playing the Oregon Trail, right? Where you went across the country and, you may die of dysentery or whatever it is. It's kind of what college football is right now. We need someone to come about and actually lead college football. And when you lead, you're going to make some people angry. So you're going to have somebody with some thick skin. But we're definitely going to talk about that tomorrow. About who should be the next commissioner or the first commissioner of college football. And by the way that this should set up, everyone should get into a room together, get your smart people together, and figure out what's important to you. We come up with a set of rules with the NIL and the transfer portal and everything else, and make sure it's stuff that we're not going to get sued over. We're not going to have senators and everyone else angry with us for putting this out there. And we're not going to have people thinking that this is slave labor with a college football. No. We need a crystal clear set of rules that can legally hold its own in court. And then we have one person that runs everything. And of course, he can have people in his quote unquote cabinet to help advise him. I don't have a problem with that. But you need to have a full college football commissioner. And I'd want someone, I don't want something like Roger Goodell. I don't want that. I want somebody who's actually played. That would make a lot of sense to me. I know Roger Goodell's an attorney and all that, and that's probably the kind of stuff that you need. Lawyers should be in the background just helping you keep from getting sued. I want someone up front that I know that when he or she speaks, that Nick Saban's going to listen, Jimbo Fisher's going to listen, whoever. This is the person, this is the alpha dog, whatever it is you want to call it, and what they say goes. And if you cheat and you do stupid things with the NIL, if you do whatever it is that's outside of our rule base, then you're going to pay the price and you're going to shut the hell up. You're not going to call emergency press conferences and lose your mind. You're not going to do that. You're going to follow the rules, or you don't get to play for the championship. That's the carrot that you'll hold over their head. All right, quick break when we come back. Final segment of the rundown. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Appreciate the call there, Uncle Lou. Appreciate the input from you folks there. Staubach's got to be 90, Jimmy. You know, somebody that they threw out there that I was like, you know what? That would make some sense. I said I want someone that plays, but Condoleezza Rice, I mean, that's a smart woman. Why not? Why not go with that? You can't stop Jimbo from being Jimbo. Very good point, sir. Jetmec may have a point. Josh Pate is a good example, but would you rather have someone that played or coached? That's a good point too, Jimmy. Who would actually want that job? It's a thankless job because you're gonna piss everybody off. Fulmer might be too old. I mean, he definitely I think should be in the thought process of it, but he might be too old. Oh Jesus. I'm not even gonna read that comment, Jet Mech. Holy crap. Welcome back to the rundown. Out to the phones we go. Welcome into the show.
Mr. Rob Sanders, kudos to you with some very good show today. Very interesting stuff, I must say, sir. The person, I don't know who that is, but you know what? That would fix college football is all a mess with this NIT stuff, pay it. That's what happened. By the way, that's what happened to DJ, man, when they put him on TV with a commercial. He forgot how to play football. He can't play football no more. So, Dabo's going to start him for 2 or 3 games until he shows that he ain't.
Slow down just a second. You're going to look silly if Uiagalelei comes out there and starts throwing the ball like he did against Notre Dame 2 seasons ago.
That'll be fine with me, my friend.
You back on the bandwagon train. We will get you a nice regalia DJ Uiagalelei shirt, and you can sit there and be like, I knew it all along.
I'll wear it proudly, and I won't hurt my feelings if that happens, but I don't think so.
You got to go and find some Georgia fans because they were breaking neck about, man, we don't want Stetson Bennett. Then he wins the national title. Like, we love him. He's great.
Yeah.
You got to go.
Yeah.
They can teach you that. That's what
good
Clemson
observation.
Fans can learn from Georgia fans.
Good.
Georgia fans can make Clemson fans better just by how they dealt with their quarterback last season.
You're on top of it today, Rob, buddy. You got it. Nailed it again. You are on your A game. You got your A game out going on.
I'm trying.
But back to this. We need to find a guy. You're like, they'll fix college football. Find a guy that will rule over and make the rules so everybody obey them. You screw up, you ain't playing in the playoffs. And Saban will listen to, all of them will listen to him. And that, I don't know who that is, but that'll fix college football.
All right, man. Hey, as always, I appreciate you calling, buddy. Thank you so much.
Adios.
All right, see you later. Yeah, and I don't know who that's going to be. Marinate on that topic because we're going to talk about that tomorrow, like who should be the commissioner of college football. Someone who can throw their name into the hat right now that would have a lot of weight with me is Sankey from the SEC. Just by the way that he handled the pandemic, when he wasn't like the Big Ten where he's like, oh, we're not going to do anything. Greg Sankey led the way. And he should be respected for that and the way that he put it together. Because in his mind, he put safety first, the safety of the players and everything else. But we knew there was going to be football as far as the SEC goes. We knew that. And he got all of the smart people together, which is what you're supposed to do when you're a leader. He got all of them together, and he figured out a way to make it work. And then you know what happened? Everybody else followed him. That's basically what happened. So he's a guy that should be in the mix. And I know I said earlier, I want someone that's actually played or coached. Uncle Lou with a good point that Steve Spurrier's probably a little advanced in age. Someone was talking about Phil Fulmer. We'll put some names out there tomorrow on the rundown because there are, we're going to come up with our 6 tomorrow, 6 folks that should be in the mix to run college football, which, by the way, if we're going to keep college football and keep it from going away, this is what has to happen. You have to get away from what the NCAA is doing because in reality, they probably don't care. They don't care about you as a fan. They don't care about the athletes that they have out there. They just want to collect their checks. If they truly cared about, keeping rules and things like that, we would know, first of all, what happened with Tennessee when they were stuffing, McNugget baskets full of hundreds. We'd already have a ruling on that. It doesn't take 10 years to investigate. We'd also have North Carolina still under sanctions for giving away degrees in African American studies out of the drive-through window of an Arby's. We would have something that would be fixed with that. So the NCAA doesn't care. They just don't want to get sued. We need someone who's not scared to walk into a room and say, you know what? We're going to do things right. We're going to do things right. And if you don't like it, then to hell with you. It's just the way that it has to be. It has to be somewhat of a dictatorship. And dictate what's fair. Because right now, a lot of it's just not. All right, I'm on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good. Appreciate folks calling in today. Folks in the chat room, you guys, as always, are awesome. A good point from Uncle Lou, who's on fire today, by the way. Follow his YouTube channel at Uncle Lou. I don't think the rest of college football would support anybody from the SEC as a commissioner. Well, if they look at it from the perspective of what he's done, not what he's the commissioner of now, but what he's done and how college football is better because of the things that he's done, then they're just closed-minded and stupid. They can go play Sunbelt games for the rest of their lives. You need a leader. And when Sankey walks into a room, people pay attention. More of the rundown tomorrow. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, appreciate you guys. Sorry I hurt your head there, DJ Baby Boy. You're right, hairy leg. All right, you guys are awesome. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you guys so much.